This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Recording has started.
Great. Thanks, Ruth. So obviously I wanted to welcome everybody here. This is the 2020 FDOT NEPA assignment training for the FHWA audit team. This is audit number 4. This is very exciting. It's the fourth and last audit of the executed MOU that we set forth in December of 2016. We've worked together in multiple years, and this training is really designed to kind of bring folks back up to speed on the SWEP application. We're going to talk about some enhancements we've made to the application itself, some enhancements we've made to our PD&E, which is Project Development and Environmental Process, which is the environmental process in Florida that covers both the federal pieces of the process as well as the state specific pieces of the environmental process. But this training's for our audit team, you guys that are on the call, to get you familiar with how to access our files, how to look at the documentation, how to navigate within the system, elements like that. One thing we are doing, obviously, is we're recording this session, and then we're going to put it out there on the internet, and we're going to provide access to you guys so you can use it as a resource. So you don't have to remember everything today. There's only 2 things you got to remember. 1, we recorded it, and you're going to have access to it. And 2, Ruth, myself, and there's a whole entire development team, plus you've got Joe over at FHWA Florida Division that knows the intricacies of the application and should be able to answer any and all questions. I will tell you as you move forward and you're using these things, if for any reason whatsoever you have any questions, we don't want people to ever get frustrated. So don't get frustrated. Just give us a call, send us an email, and we'll follow up with you and see if we can't clear up those questions. But don't email us or call us right when you're frustrated. If you can't figure it out, just let us know. We're happy to help you guys. Okay, go ahead and hit the next slide for me. And so, obviously we're doing this through GoToMeeting. One of the things we talked about right at the beginning, just because we heard some background noise, was the idea of if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Like I said, on the next slide, we're actually going to do some introductions of the team. So just be mindful if you're on mute now that you'll have to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then mute yourself again after that. Oh, I see Jason coming. So he's coming at a perfect time.
Good morning.
I hear him clicking. Hey, Jason, you actually showed up at a perfect time. We're just moving on to the introduction slide on the next slide. So if you can go ahead and hit that for me, Ruth. And we're just about to start. Jason Watts is our director. He's on. I'm Pete McGilvery. I manage the quality and performance section underneath Jason, and then Ruth Rowaza is our environmental process analyst, our charge of SWEP, and she's going to do all the cool stuff and the demos and stuff today. Maybe Jason and Ruth, if you guys want to say something about yourselves, and then we're going to actually go around to everybody else. And then the next slide after that is just going to be an overview of the agenda real quick for everybody to have a context. And then we're going to let Jason have some time and kind of give us his thoughts. So maybe Jason, just introduce yourself, and then we'll do Ruth.
Hi, I'm Jason Watts. I'm the director of the Office of Environmental Management. I've been in this position predominantly for the whole time we've had NEPA assignment. I've been the director for all of the audits. I think most people on the call know me. The only real thing I want to point out before I ramble in a minute is that feel free to reach out to me at any time. If you have any questions or something you'd like to see done differently, reach out. I think the audit should be a learning process. So I'll hand it off to Ruth.
I'm Ruth Rowaza. I've been working with OEM since 1999, initially as a consultant with a high-speed rail project way back. And then that kind of morphed into ETDM and NEPA assignment and SWEPT, and I've been coordinating the development of and maintenance of those applications. And I'm glad you're here. And should we?
Okay, so let's Yeah, let's go. Ruth, just run down that list starting from the top.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through it as it's showing on my screen, and Eric Whitehead is the next person.
Hello, everybody. This is a great opportunity for just me to call and a second ago to see a couple of you. As you know, I kind of work with the and I mostly with Joe and together. So great meeting today, and I'm working with everybody.
And Karen. You're on mute.
How about that? That worked.
Yeah.
I had my phone on muted. I didn't realize I had to also unmute the computer.
Yeah, it's always complicated. Double
so, yeah, note for the rest of the staff. Don't follow me. So Karen Brunel, I'm the Director of Project Development. Here at Federal Highway, I'm in the Florida Division Office. So for the rest of the Federal Highway folks, as you introduce yourself, please kind of give where you're located and what your day job is. And that'll help Ruth, Pete, Eric, and Jason get a better sense for the audit team. So I just want to thank you all for putting together this session for us and giving us the highlights, and then on the changes of SWEPT, and then the in-depth training for our new audit team members. I really think since the first audit has happened, we've really grown in our partnership, and that has realized in an awesome working relationship. And I just look forward to capping off our audit process with a gold star. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Greg?
Camera on. There we go. Hello, I'm Greg Hall. I am the District 2 Transportation Engineer. I've been with Federal Highway since, well, I've been with the Florida Division since 2004. And amusingly enough, I actually did like a 6-week rotational assignment with District 2 before I even knew that I was going to join the Florida Division. And then I ended up getting the District 2 Transportation Engineer. So that was kind of entertaining. But anyways, I appreciate your all's time here, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Marisa?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marisa Lopez Cruz. I'm with Federal Highway Headquarters, the Office of Project Development and Environmental Review, and I'm the primary point of contact for Florida Audit. And Headquarters, we provide assistance to different divisions and manage a couple of programs like planning environmental linkages and others. So happy that to see where we are here in Florida in terms of the NEPA assignment, and recognizing that this one is the last one, and all the effort that FHWA had done in collaboration with the division in terms of getting the program up to this point. So any questions, and feel free to reach out and anything that I can help. So
Thank you. Joe?
Caught me off guard.
Sorry.
It's okay. Joe Sullivan, everybody knows me. A lot of backup.
Can you still hear me? Ruth,
Yeah.
nod?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The echo's gone now.
Okay, excellent. Everybody knows me. I've been the audit coordinator here for the time. I just want to tell Pete, Ruth, Jason, Eric, really appreciate the working relationship that we've had. I appreciate us getting it done and doing a good job of it. It's a good team overall. We've got a lot of work to do, and I appreciate us going through the steps and having a very organized, efficient way of doing it. So kudos to Karen and Pete for their leadership in doing this, and Jason's leadership at the DOT.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Susan?
Hi, folks. My name is Susan Jones. I'm a civil engineer at Headquarters for almost 10 years. I am actually a stormwater water quality specialist, but I've been brought in with the NEPA assignment, I guess, to train with the best with the last audit.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Kathy.
Good morning. This is Kathy Kendall, and I am the planning team leader with the FHWA Florida Division. Formerly on the environmental team a few years ago, but once a NEPA PIPA, always a NEPA PIPA. So it's good to be back again on the audit. We appreciate FDOT's always there to help us if we have technical issues. So looking forward to a great audit year again. Thanks.
Thank you. Scott?
Hi, this is Scott Jones. I'm an attorney with Federal Highway Administration Southfield Legal Services Division in Atlanta. And my boss, Gloria Hardiman Tobin, who heads that office, work in tandem on this. Sometimes I'll be participating like today, sometimes it'll be Gloria, but we appreciate the update on the training for SWEPT here and look forward to working with everybody in this upcoming audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom? Tom, you might be double muted.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Sorry about that. Tom Brecker. I'm the environmental team leader in the Texas division. I also happen to be the acting right-of-way program manager for the last 8 months or so. This is my 10th NEPA assignment audit and my 3rd Florida. So I'm looking forward to helping you all finish your monitoring, finish your auditing. And currently I'm doing the monitoring in Texas for TxDOT.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to apologize if I mispronounce this because it's going ... at the end of the name, but I think it's Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Michelle Palika. I work for the Resource Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just want to thank all of you for allowing the Resource Center to participate once again and allowing us to take part in the audit. And it's great to hear and see some of you again. So thank you.
Thank you. Louis?
Good morning. Well, Luis Lopez, I'm the environmental specialist here in Orlando, Florida. Right now, I think we're going to be pretty busy. Just looking at the agenda, we're going to be busy at the end of the year with the TIS in Tampa and NEPA audit. So, good year, I guess.
Good to have you. Thank you. Jorge? Jorge, you might be double muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We can.
Yep. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, my name is Jorge Rivera. I'm in the Orlando office, and I'm the District 6 engineer. I've been with Federal Highway for about 12 years now, and I actually started in Florida. I was in Tallahassee. I did the PDP training program, and then I got assigned to District 3. And once they moved some of the team down to Orlando, I got reassigned to District 6.
Welcome. Thank you. Did I miss anybody? Okay. I think that was it then. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. If you just switch it to the next slide real quick, and then we'll turn it over to Jason. Just on the screen right now is just sort of a screenshot of what the first, the first page of the agenda that we sent. So this beginning part is intended to be, as you guys probably are already recognized, many of you folks have already been on the team and been through the training and know how to use SWEPT. Hopefully we've created a system that's not very complicated, and it's very intuitive with buttons and clicks, and you can access things and without having to think about things too much. So the way that we worked with Florida Division to develop this particular agenda was knowing that there's a lot of overlap of individuals who have been through the training a few times and have been part of the FHWA Florida audit team for the last few years. We set up the agenda to make sure that the first hour was to kind of just talk about things that have changed since the last time you guys have been here. And then we'll actually break, and don't feel bad or guilty. Anybody who doesn't need to stay for, the overview of SWEPT and how, the documents get reviewed and the details, feel free to jump off the call and go do other things. We're always recording this. You can always come back and use it later. At the same time, you don't need to leave. We're happy if you want the refresher. We're happy to show you everything. And between Ruth and myself, we're absolutely going to be on to answer any of your questions. So that's kind of how it's laid out. First hour is going to be what's new and different since last time you guys were here. Then we're going to take a quick break and allow people to disconnect if they want to. And then we're going to roll right into, hey, what is SWEPT? How do you use it? How does it flow through the environmental document process? How does it look when you guys log in? Because the team members themselves will have their own unique logins into SWEPT. That unique login will be tied to, FHWA audit review team. That audit review team will see the subset of approvals from May 1st of 2019 until April 30th of 2020. And that'll be the universe of things that you guys will have access to support this year's audit. And I guess with that, we can go on to the next slide, and we're going to turn it over to Jason for any opening remarks and goodness for the team.
Yeah, so thanks, Pete. And let me apologize to begin with, because I am not going to stay with you all. I'm going to leave you in Pete and Ruth's capable hands. I have 3 or 4 back-to-back meetings. Thanks for the kind words. I'm really thanking all of FHWA. You guys always say great things about us, and I really do appreciate it. We really do welcome all the new people. We love seeing people from other states and people from other areas of FHWA come to Florida. We love that because we think we have a wonderful program here. It's taken some time to develop, but I think at this point we have one of the premier NEPA programs in the country. And I say that with full belief. I've seen some of the other states. I think we do an amazing job in Florida. I like to think we're a role model, and we will continue that. The partnership between us and FHWA is probably the strongest it's ever been. Thank you to Karen. Thank you to Marisol. We've done a lot of work over the past few years to get into a point, I think, of mutual respect and mutual understanding. So it really is, I think we're in a really great spot, and I'm really happy to be going through the 4th audit with you all. So thank you for that. I'd also like, while I have a moment, to thank Pete and Ruth specifically, and Eric, because they've done a great job of managing the audit process for us from our side. On top of that, Ruth and Pete have done an amazing job with our system. For the people that have never seen it, I think it's fair to say you're going to walk out of the training and just be amazed at what we do in our document and approval system. I know I was when I first took a look at it. It is a very robust system that can do a lot of different things. We're very happy for that. The one thing I want to point out, and Eric leads it and he does an amazing job, we have a great self-assessment program in Florida. And it goes to my philosophy and the philosophy of all of us on this team, is that our self-assessments and our audits are supposed to give us information to make the program better. It is not a check the box. It never has been for me. It is a, let's look at it. Let's take a close look. Let's see if there's something we can fix. At the end, sometimes we disagree on whether it's significant enough to go into the writing, but we always want to learn what's right and wrong with our program so we can fix it. Right always makes us smile and gives us a little hand claps. Wrong is something we always try to take a look at and fix. One of the things we're going to point out as we go through this process with you all is we're doing a study right now during our self-assessment to document all of the different things that we've fixed because of the audits or self-assessments up to this point. You'll get the information later, but that just shows how we view the audit and the self-assessment. I think that's it. That's all of my little notes. As I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the team here, Ruth, Eric, Pete. Feel free to call me. Just call me directly, send me an email, let me know what's going on. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the time to really making this a great audit. And we'll go from here. Pete, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Have a great day. Appreciate your time. Okay, for us today, kind of going forward, we're going to briefly talk about changes since 2019. That's going to cover, just so the audit team, you guys are on the same page with us. We did release in January of 2019 the 2019 version of the PD&E manual. There is a 2020 manual that's coming out, but it's in process and probably will come out either late spring or early summer. So what that means, though, is that all the approvals in this audit period from May 1st of 2019 until April 30th of 2020, just tomorrow, will all fall under the same PD&E manual. So I'm going to talk about the changes in that manual, just so that at a high level, you know, kind of some of the things that have changed in our project development and environmental manual, which supports NEPA as well as the state process, and just kind of an overview of changes in that documentation that would be reflected within you know, the environmental documents that are being built. I'll also tell you about some changes coming in 2020 that's going to be adopted. And then Ruth's going to talk about the SWEPT application specifically. And, you know, we've got a team of developers. We're always working to improve. I've got you know, the way I kind of look at things with our team is today is the best available until we know more, gain more experience, and then we continue to always strive to do better. So today is better than I was a year ago. And, you know, a year from now is going to be better than we are today, just continuous improvement. And so what you'll see is we're always evolving both our processes and our applications to either deal with new things that are coming in, or maybe there are things coming out of the self-assessments. Maybe there's things coming out of the audits. Maybe it's things that we're just recognizing that we need to enhance, or, you know, we can do better. So let's work on it. So you'll hear a little bit about what those changes have been since you guys have been here last, within the last year. And then I'll come back and I'll actually finish up kind of a preview. We've got a slide of kind of the biggest SWEPT related efforts that we have ongoing. Now, will you come back and look at those enhancements in an audit? No. Will they show up in monitoring going forward? Yeah, they absolutely will. So wanted to make sure we had a slide to kind of talk about that going forward. Then we're going to take a quick break, or at least allow folks to kind of jump on or jump off, whatever they want to do. And then we're going to let Ruth go through an overview of SWEPT. I'm come back and talk about the environmental review process. And then she's going to do a demonstration as logging in as one of your team members, and how you're going to access things, how you're going to search for stuff, how you're going to open files, all of those various elements. So let's go ahead and go. I think the next slide is just a transition over to the changes. If you can go ahead and switch to that.
Are you seeing?
I'm not seeing it yet. There we go. And we'll just go to the next slide. Okay, I see it now.
Okay, good. I was going to say, I've already.
It's okay. Hey, we're all doing this remotely. We're all going to have a shared experience for it. So let's just have our fingers crossed and hope the internet works for us. Anyway, so I wanted to pull out some of the PD&E manual enhancement highlights. So this is reflected in, for those of you who have already looked at the January 2019 version, this is the information that was in there. The things that are listed on here were things that were updated from the 2018 version. The reason why I think it's important, just because this manual covers all of the approval processes for everything that was approved within this last cycle. So just some of the highlights. within Part 1, Chapter 4, it was enhanced to handle the emergency declarations, provide more guidance for how things were handled. The manual is updated in relevant chapters like CEs and stuff to deal with the CE guidance from y'all's memo on 2018, as well as the previous 2017 memo that added some additional CEs and make sure that those things got incorporated. There was also the final rule of environmental impacts and related procedures. And then you see the date there. That was reflected in all the chapters that it should be reflected. So we have chapters on environmental assessment, we have chapters on environmental impact statements, all that stuff. So on the relevant chapters where that needed to be updated, they were updated throughout. And then department-wide, just so that folks that have dealt with FDOT through the years, there was a change in our design phase of the agency, and the manual that they traditionally would use to document the design phase and how design plans would be developed was traditionally called the Plans Preparation Manual, and they went through a reorg and a re-engineering of that particular manual and changed it all to what they call the FDM, which is the Florida Design Manual. So that was changed throughout too, but it still points to the same manual. It was more of a reorganization and a rebranding of it. The information itself, while it may have been expanded on within the Florida Design Manual, it didn't lose anything. Like, we didn't see anything that was in the Plans Prep Manual move to other manuals. It's still part of the same one. It's just been rebranded. Some other stuff to kind of highlight was just the idea of within the last audit period, you guys actually saw within SWEPT, we had released a completely electronic version of the Type 2 categorical exclusion. That's completely, from the initial documentation to how things are analyzed to how it passes through the system and gets reviewed at multiple levels and completes quality assurance and quality control. Whether that's with the district with their consultants, or whether that's with the district with their leadership, and whether that's up through the Office of Environmental Management, which goes through a multi-tiered review process before ultimately ending up on Jason's desk for signature. That whole process is electronic and has been built into SWEPT, and the manual was updated to reflect that process. Previously, it was, paper and pencil, or not paper and pencil, but paper process outside the system and uploaded. There had been guidance for Federal Register notices sent by FHWA. The right chapters were updated with the right notice guidelines to make sure that was being captured. Within FDOT, there's a big push for context classifications. Making sure that you understand the full context in a particular transportation improvement location. Do they need sidewalks? Is there a lot of people walking? Is there a lot of bikes? Is there, all sorts of what's the traffic, what's the density, all those various things, and it's captured within our context classification process. And so the PD&E manuals are updated to reflect those considerations as well throughout. Those that know Roy Jackson and Matt Marino, they spent some time adding some clarifications throughout the Section 4F resources chapter. A lot of redefinitions. They enhanced it to provide more clarity. Anybody who's been through that knows it can be unclear at times. So they spent a lot of time trying to be very specific for how the resources are identified and how they're evaluated and how they're documented. So they did a lot of updates there. Those same folks were also part of the 106 chapter update. So archaeological and historical sites, they added clarifications. There's also a newer process by the council for electronic 106 review process. So that procedure was also added into that particular chapter. We also had the air quality chapter. There was guidance from October of 2016 memo, and the air quality chapter was updated to confirm that and make sure that the guidance was part of the chapters. Contamination also, there was some clarifications on when to do a level 1 versus a level 2, what's the difference between the two, why you do one over the other, and what the expectations are. So it was mostly just clarifications on there. And then the last one, the commitments, and these aren't all the edits. There might be little minor ones here and there, but these are ones that I think are a little more noticeable than anything else. And the last one for the commitments is that within the department, there's the procedure and the policy for how to handle commitments, and there's a chapter in our PD&E manual, and it was updated to include elements of within the policy for how a commitment is tracked and how it's used and how it's routed within another application that's used by other parts of the organization called Project Suite Enterprise Edition. That's more of an application that's used by PD&E, by design, and right away and future folks. And the reason why the commitments procedure sits within there is because of all those other phases having access to that application. So as a commitment comes in and it gets tracked, the folks that are responsible for the commitment all the way through the process provide an update and provide statuses on when those elements are complete. So the PD&E manual was updated to reflect that as well. Go ahead to the next slide for me.
Hey, Pete?
Oh, sure. You got a question, Karen?
Yeah, can you just refresh the out-of-state folks what a Type 2 CE is, since that's a unique Florida nomenclature?
It really is. Thank you. So in Florida, we have a Type 2 categorical exclusion, and it's a unique element that sits in between sort of the C list and what would be considered an environmental assessment. So there is not a question of significance. In order to get to a Type 2 categorical exclusion, there must be no significant impact, but you do a more detailed, more rigorous review and consideration of all the various elements that need to be considered to come back with some documentation and to support the no significant impacts determination. So it's not a question of whether you have significance, it's have you done the right work to clearly document that that's the case. So it's not a listed, and it's not an environmental assessment, but it's a lot of work sort of in between to make sure that you've got all the ducks in a row and have everything documented to a standard that allows you to unequivocally say, yes, we have no significant impacts. I saw something pop up on the chat. Is that a question for us?
No, Karen was saying thank you.
Okay, well, great. You're welcome. And thanks for pointing that out. Sometimes I will forget that there are some things that are very unique to Florida, and when I'm talking to other folks, I may forget that that's not necessarily how the rest of the nation does things. A couple of the highlights just for the 22 PD&E manual that are coming out are 2 chapters that have been needed for a very long time that are expected to be released. Now, it's not relevant to this audit reporting period, but it does kind of speak to the understanding that we are continuing to always work on our program and our processes. And so it became important to us. At one point, we had a navigational chapter, but there are so many nuances for how to deal with Coast Guard specific projects that it made sense to kind of rework and build a separate chapter that focuses on projects from the Coast Guard and how to deal specifically with navigational issues. So when we release the 2020 chapter, we'll have some pretty good guidance for that. And then another chapter that had been in the works for a while. Traditionally, folks may think of this as called the ARC, but it's the Acquisition and Restoration Council Coordination. So, This doesn't happen a lot in our agency, and so it became very important that we had a well thought out, methodical procedure in place so that if and when a project encountered needing to deal with the ARC, that they had a pretty robust process to know how they needed to follow it. Because many folks don't do this very often. So it became important to make sure that we had some guidance in place to kind of move folks forward. There's obviously in the 2020 chapter, there's always refinements and stuff, but I thought the big thing to kind of just point out to you guys that when the new manual comes out, there will be those 2 new chapters. Anybody have any questions on any of that? Okay, not hearing anything. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have spent a great deal of time enhancing our training resources. Actually, this is a training resource that we're doing right now for you guys, something that we'll put out there and have accessible for you that you can go back and what did he say? How did he do that? How did they push that button? All that type of stuff. And just in today's environment, it just made sense for us. And what you see on your screen to the far left is we have, the Office of Environmental Management training program. It's all online and it's broken out by various tracks. And within those tracks, they could be things like, what's all your trainings for SWEPT, the Statewide Environmental Project Tracker? Hey, let me see all the sessions you have on that. Let me see all the sessions about, your PD&E, your project development and environmental process. Or let me see, how do you specifically do your environmental coordination pieces? Let me get that as well. And so each one of those tracks has a litany of resources that we put together to help acquaint our user community and our consultants and our staff with how we do things. So that's kind of one of the initial jump off points for us. And you can see that there's a link down at the bottom. There's also a section there on NEPA assignment. So that's a spot where this training would go for you guys as well. It'll be under the NEPA assignment page. We'll also, the next slide in the middle, or the next screenshot in the middle, is we have worked within the department. There's been a big push to develop a YouTube channel for all the various offices. And so for us, all of our videos have been uploaded into the YouTube environment under an Office of Environmental Management library. I think we have almost 100 videos and recorded trainings and CBTs and all that stuff listed on there, all broken out to various categories for the elements that it's responsible for, or the information that it's communicating. So that's another great resource on there. And the next screen is actually showing in that first screen, if you had selected one of the tracks. I know on your screen it's probably very difficult to see, but you can see each one of those little rows actually equals a track, and then that big long one in the middle is one of those tracks. I believe that one on there is the PD&E track. And so the way that we have that organized is the PD&E manual itself is kind of part one is like overview of the process. The processes you're going to follow. Well, how do you pick a class of action? What is an environmental assessment? What are the CE2s? What's our project file and retention processes? How do you do public involvement? Things like that. And then there's a part two, which is the details for how to perform specific activities. I'm looking at historical and archaeological. I'm looking at wetlands and surface waters. I'm looking at relocations. I'm looking at, and so that's how the manual is organized, and that's how the training itself is organized. And when you go to that page, it'll be organized the same way. And if we have recorded sessions or CBTs associated to support each one of those chapters, they'll be linked. And if you ever went to our OEM webpage and you looked at the PD&E manual, and right next to every single PD&E manual page, or the piece of the manual, like it'll link to the chapter, there'll be a recorded CBT or a recording right next to it as well. So when you're looking at that chapter, you can actually click on the link and you can get some detailed overview of what that chapter talks about, how it's performed, what elements of information are going to be within there. And then the last thing is kind of the new thing for you guys, which is working with OIT. They developed through us and our team an Environmental Management Academy. And so these are the collection of actual CBTs. On the other sites, they could be recordings just like we're doing right now. They could be sessions from other agencies that we've brought in. We've had, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Florida Fish, we've had Army Corps of Engineers, we've had National Marine Fisheries. When they come and they teach us how to do their process, we record it and we provide access to it. In this Environmental Management Academy, these are interactive CBTs with questions and answers and tests and results and all of those various elements, so that as individuals go through there, they go through a little testing at the end to make sure that they're retaining the information as well. Now, everything on that Environmental Management Academy, that link, that's open to everybody. You guys could go there right now, or you can go there anytime you want. What I mean is that it's not in a closed system to the department. A lot of folks that need to use this are individuals that we have as consultants that are doing work and services for us, or it's one of the main ways that as we bring new folks into our office or the districts in their offices, we give them, access to the academy, point them to it as a really clean way to understand how we do business. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I have one.
Okay. Sure. What you got, Karen?
So is that training that's a good resource for new employees and things like that, and the consultants? Is there any part of the program that you require certain people to take the academy, or is it more of a strongly encouraged suggestion?
Yeah, I would say right now it's strongly encouraged suggestion. The expectation is you're going to do it, but we have not formalized it and said that in order for you to have this position, you had to have taken it. Our expectation is you're going to, and as we onboard people, we actually within our office, and this is probably a good thing to talk about, we've actually, within the last year, another change is we've actually created an onboarding team within our office. Sue Clark is in charge of it, and then she kind of manages all of the, we work together, we identify all the things that for this position, they need to be aware of. How do we, how does SWEP work? How does EST work? How do you, what's PD&E? How do you become a project delivery coordinator, which we call PDCs? What's an engineer need to use? And they create a plan that may last weeks or months that kind of give them in the first week, an overview at a high level how things work. And then each week they go into more and more detail, and they'll set up time with myself and Ruth or Margie or Katasha. They'll bring folks in and we'll all sit in a room, and it'll be this hour's dedicated to this topic. And we'll sit there and just go from soup to nuts on that particular topic. And they have a whole entire plan that I think they've actually already met yesterday afternoon. Do you remember what the topic was yesterday, Ruth?
Traffic engineering.
Traffic engineering. Yeah. So we've formalized it, and so while we haven't, basically put in a procedure that says thou must, we're setting up the program in such a way that thou will is really what we're doing.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. No worries. Okay, since we don't have anything else, Ruth, the next part's yours, so I'm going to let you talk about updates and SWEP.
Okay, some of the things that we've done is, as Pete and Jason mentioned before, SWEPT is our website that we use to support the environmental review process, and part of that is some standard e-forms that people document their environmental analysis through our type 2 CE forms, our reevaluation forms, and our type 1 CE forms. And we have made some changes to those forms that you may, especially the people coming back, you may notice, or some of them occurred during the review. So you may wonder, well, why is this formatted a little bit differently than this later one? And it's because some of these enhancements went out. One of the things that we did was, in response to many of our project managers, they wanted to just improve the formatting of a computer generated output and making it more consistent and clean. And so you'll probably notice some of that in the PDFs that we've been working hard to get it to be very presentable, so somebody can be proud to take it to a public hearing or something like that. We also did some minor things, like we have our tip and stip fields they were putting all the information in one box, and we just split it out so it's more consistent. Our type 2 CE form, which went out during the last audit, we just had some cleanup things to do, and updating some standard statements that were updated throughout the year for clarification, so that people didn't have to keep typing the same thing out of our PD&E manual into the form. We caught most of that at the initial release, but some of it was just a few phrases here and there that we just needed to make sure got in so people didn't have to type it. We also created a job aid, and it's out there if you wanted to review it sometime. It's just a PDF of all the standard statements that are used in a type 2 CE, depending on how they answer questions, because that particular form, they go through a series of questions about the potential impacts to various resources. And as they answer the questions, different standard statements apply. And so the user community said, can you just give us a whole list of everything so we know what to expect? And so we did that for them. We also had a number of changes and enhancements to our reevaluation form this year. Again, most of it was fairly simple things just to help them document more quickly, allowing comments when the right-of-way question is answered yes, displaying a signature time stamp for the OEM director on the PDF, requiring an attachment for the reeval consultation, and importing data from a type 2 form into the reevaluation form when it's applicable. For example, information about that was in the environmental document, that since that's a very robust form now, we can pull in information that needs to be provided on the reevaluation form as well. Some of the miscellaneous things, we have added the ability for the FDP folks in the grants program and the trail program to start using SWEPT when they are ready to use it. We know they're not using it yet, but we did want to let you know that that is ready to go in SWEPT once that program is needing to put their type 1s in SWEPT. We've improved some usability of the forgot password function so that you actually can just click it and get an email if you forget your password. The approvals report, which you all will be using a lot, we added additional information about environmental certifications, added related FMs, and then for our project managers, we added the ability to create an Excel listing of all the projects in the project file, so they have their little checklist, making sure, okay, this is what I need in there, and this is what I have in there, and it matches up. On the project page, which provides the information about the projects, we've added the cooperating and participating agencies if they've been identified and accepted the invitation. We made the project description expandable and collapsible because some people put a whole bunch of information in and it was taking up the whole page. So by default, it's just a small area, and then you can click a link, click a button and read it all, and then click it again to close it. We display the FMs for prior reevaluations and segments being advanced at the top of the page now. So our main SWEPT page is tied to the environmental project. But as it moves forward in different phases, it's often assigned a different FM number. And we found that people need an easy way to see what those numbers are, because as projects move forward in reeval, some people may not even remember what the original environmental FM number was. So we provide ways to link back and forth. Oh, sorry, I did this one twice, listing the cooperating agencies again. That's the same thing. And include the segment numbers being evaluated for reevals in the project approval history. And that's at the bottom of the page. When you're in there, you'll see the whole process that the project document has gone through to get approved. And when it's a reeval, it actually also says the segment numbers, because that particular FM number could actually be going through multiple reevals, and it's just to help people know exactly what's being processed. And Pete, you wanted to talk about future SWEPT enhancements?
I did, and also I guess I'll mention a couple more things that a big thing to think about is last year, this FHWA audit team didn't look at type 1s, but the year before that they did, and during the review of those type 1s, as things were being identified, we kind of made those changes in real time. So they were outside of this kind of period. But because you guys weren't looking at the type 1s, and you are now this year, just to kind of remind you of a couple of those things that you will see those changes when you're looking at those type 1s now. One of those things is the planning consistency language for section 11. When you guys were reviewing type 1s 2 years ago, that was one of the main concerns, and in real time we changed that during the audit review. So you will notice that on all the type 1s that planning consistency is addressed. Also, there were concerns, there weren't questions related to essential fish habitat. Again, we changed that in real time with you guys and showed future changes where type 1s where EFH was being addressed. But like I said, I know last year you guys didn't look at type 1s, so you didn't get to see it, and verify that those changes had occurred on everything going forward. And I'd say this year, I know in conversations with Karen and Joe that you guys are going to look at type 1s this year. So just wanted to highlight that as changes that we made a couple years ago with you guys that I know will be absolutely visible to you guys when you're looking at things. Also, I just wanted to bring up some of the future SWEPT enhancements. Like I said, we are always continuing to do more and enhance our applications and enhance our processes. And these are some of the things. We've been working with Roy and Matt, the districts and legal, and we will be shifting the implementation of our 4F forms that are signed by Jason and ultimately things that go through legal sufficiency and stuff to be an electronic process where the forms are developed in the district. They're reviewed by Matt and Roy, and depending on the nature of the 4F determination, whether it's programmatic, whether it's going to need an individual, whether it's an exemption, there's all different nuances to how the form is routed, where it stops in the process, and who has to look at various elements. Ruth is working with Roy and Matt right now. They are in the process of developing the webinar training for that piece, and in the next month or two, that will be going out statewide. Last year, we did the Type 2 categorical exclusion as a complete electronic implementation, and since that was so successful and it became a really good foundation for how you would document and build the approval and have the analysis there, and how you can go through the review through the quality assurance and quality control process and get sign-offs all throughout and be able to pass back and forth. That became a really good foundation for other electronic documents that needed to follow suit. The next one we're working on is the state version, the state environmental impact statement, that's going to be or is modeled off of the Type 2. We've actually just finished statewide testing on all that, and we're dealing with the comments that came back in that statewide testing, and we should roll out on that this summer. That also sets the stage for mimicking the electronic implementation of producing an environmental assessment. We think after we built the Type 2 and after we built the SEER, we have enough experience for how an environmental assessment should be built and documented and reviewed and approved. So we'll begin working on that this summer and into winter. And the reason I did the little curlicue thing there is probably because of what we're doing right now, which is we're all dealing remotely, and so schedules could be kind of crazy for a little while for how things are going to be. So I guess the curlicue implies it's aspirational at this point. So we'll see. A couple other things that just to give you guys a heads up on things we're working on is 3 years later, dealing with the SWEPT electronic project file, we've recognized there's ways that we can enhance the way that it's organized within the structure. For instance, a real enhancement, I think, to the project file that's needed that wasn't very evident or apparent very early on is how we show the reevaluations of each of the segments of the project. I think we can do a better job to make sure that all the documents that are relevant only to this reevaluation segment are collected and together. And while the original stuff is still up there and accessible, you don't hunt and peck for documents that are only relevant to this segment being reevaluated. So we've got some consolidation and reorganization efforts that we're going to continue to think through and implement. And then on the backside, for those of you that are very familiar with Florida processes, we also have a system called the EST, the Environmental Screening Tool, which was developed to help us with our planning and environmental linkages process, where we integrate all of our resource agencies and our state and federal partners to kind of look at proposed transportation improvement projects ahead of the environmental process to get feedback to make sure that the project as proposed and the alternatives that are coming forward are really the best projects and or alternatives. And being able to document all of those exchanges about this project in this area, what is it going to potentially impact, what are the potential concerns, and being able to document those issues. So we have that system, and then we have SWEPT, which is the environmental documents that are developed from those projects. And there's a lot of information that we can connect between those two systems. And there's things that happen within one system that the other system could leverage on. For instance, within the environmental screening tool, it's really an outward facing application that connects to the public, in some instances providing access to all the documentation, all the review results. It has electronic notifications and stuff. And then you've got your environmental documents that are developed in SWEPT, and there just looks like there's a really good marriage to be able to leverage the two to increase access where appropriate on various elements. So those are kind of some of the bigger things that are coming, hopefully over the next year. Hopefully COVID-19 doesn't put us off track by too much, but that is the plan. And I think the next one is just kind of questions. This is where we were going to take a break and first see if anybody has any questions on that part, and then we were going to go into kind of SWEPT, what it is, how to demo it, how to what our environmental process is, how the documentation gets in, how it flows through the system, and then a demonstration of logging in as one of you guys and how the system's going to work. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
I do.
That's great. This is for you guys, whatever you got.
So I will ask, I assume the answer is yes, but you will share the slides with us afterwards?
100%. Yeah, you guys have the agenda. We'll give you the PowerPoint, and you'll have this recording. all the above.
Perfect. That was all I had. I really appreciate the time this morning.
Our pleasure.
Great.
All right, so I think we're going to start marching on. If anybody needs to stand up, move around, please do. If anybody wants to jump off because you've seen them before, feel free to do that. You're not going to hurt any of our feelings. And just like I told Karen, we're absolutely recording everything. You've got the agenda we already gave you. We'll give you the PowerPoint that you're seeing on the screen. And then you'll obviously have the recording of both the PowerPoint, my voice, Ruth's voice, all your voices, as well as a copy of the actual demonstrations where she's clicking things and kind of moving around. I guess with that, Ruth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So first, I'm just going to give an overview of the SWEPT application. As we've mentioned before, SWEPT is our application that our districts and consultants use and our OEM folks use to develop and process our environmental documents for approval. It's also used to help keep track of project schedules. It's integrated with our PD&E scope of service. We have a tool where they can build their scope of service, and that is stored also in SWEPT, and that's used to help identify what the consultant's role is and who's doing what. We also assign and document the environmental document reviews. You know, in some cases, we need a subject matter expert to review a specific technical document, and so we'll assign it to that person. We also have a standard naming convention for our files and a standard way of organizing them and storing them and moving them to our department's environmental document management system, and that helps us keep that all consistent for our retention and file management requirements. And of course, like in this instance, it is helping us support the self-assessment and FHWA audits of environmental documents and report the quality and performance management results so we can keep track of that and monitor that. Our users are lots of different people throughout the department and outside. Our district environmental administrators and managers, our district PD&E managers and project managers and team members on the PD&E projects. Up in OEM, we have our project delivery coordinators, our managers, our quality assurance staff like Eric and I, and we have the OGC environmental document reviewing attorneys. We actually have specific attorneys at DOT who are assigned to our office, and they have access to the documents and to produce the administrative record when they need to through SWEPT. And of course, we have a special view for you guys too. And all of these users, I'd like to point out, we've kind of built SWEPT so that it focuses on what the user needs to do and gives them access to what they need, but don't get bogged down with a lot of options and stuff that they would never use. So every one of these types of users has a special view, and later I'm going to be showing you the view that we have for you to help support the audit. In general, we have SWEPT broken up into about 5 different components. The project dashboard is where we keep track of the project schedules. The districts don't actually put the schedules in SWEPT. They have software in the department that we pull those schedules for just the environmental milestones, but it helps us bring it up face forward in the environmental process, review process, so we all know where this project is, where it has been, and what the plan is for moving it forward. We have project input and setup tools, and that's where our standard environmental document forms are, where they create the projects and they fill out those forms. Project documents is what we use to process the documents through the process, and also where the legal staff comes in if they need to create an administrative record. And our quality and performance management section is used predominantly by Eric and Pete and our self-assessment teams to monitor and record results of the self-assessments. And then we have a team management, which our project delivery coordinators can use to actually assign legal and OEM special subject matter experts to specific teams. The home page looks like this. I'm going to actually show a demo of it, but in terms of general navigation, they can either click on a box to go to the module, or we have menus that expand to get to the pages that way. So without further ado, I am going to switch my screen right now and bring up a demo of that site. And my screen is switching right now, so hopefully in a moment you'll be able to see it. Are you seeing
Yeah,
it now?
we see it.
Okay, great.
Yep. It's
So here I am logging into our test server as a project manager from the district. And just showing you an overview. At the very top, we have breadcrumbs. We have ways to get to notifications, alerts, and user setup information. We always ask our users to keep their contact information up to date. Some of our users can also delegate authorities, like our managers, if they're going to be out of town, they can name somebody else who would do their approvals while they're out of town. General navigation, we've got the hamburger menu that lets you open or close the left menu. We also have some buttons up at the top that may or may not be active depending on what the page is. It's the PDF, a zip file, Excel, and Word. And at the very far right here, we have a search box where you can type in a keyword or a financial management number or something and find projects or documents. You can even search for people, contact information using that search. You go back up to the top to click home to get back, or you can go to the left menu to navigate. Some of the things just showing you here are the various options that the districts have access to, like lists of where the project is in the approval process, their dashboards with their schedules, standard reports. In the middle of the screen there, they see alerts, like if they have something that's waiting there for their approval, it'll show up there. They also have a list of projects that they're on that project team, and they can get to the project by clicking the green link there, or they can, if they have a long list, they can search through the table using the search in the FM, which I'm going to show you later because you guys can do that on your homepage too. This is the project detail page, and this is where you find out more information about the project. At the top there are some links to various people on the team. You can see a map, the project description. This is what I was mentioning before. You can expand or collapse it. Sometimes they get very long, but so we are showing less by default. Information about the project, like cooperating, participating agencies, the schedule, and here's the project documents. This is like the bulk of it. They're organized under different folders. You can collapse or show all, or just show the folders that have information. It tells you, it tells this project manager that this particular document has gone to our EDMS system. It shows all the supporting documents that were attached to this particular type 2 CE. And you'll notice it says attachments or technical materials. It also has the publication dates, file size of those things. Down at the bottom, we've also have links to anything that's coded as a correspondence. And then we have our approval history, which just shows you who has approved what and when. And at the bottom, there's a help with overview, quick guides, training videos, contacts, and the list of what's new. And this is where they would go, like if they needed to find out who was their PDC or who's a contact in the district where they need. So back to the PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions about that? I know it was really quick. A lot of that stuff you won't need to use, so it won't be on your view, but we do want you to know the overview of the entire site, like from the perspective of one of our district users. So the next part is just a more detailed view of what your view into SWEPT looks like.
Great. Yeah, if you can
Oh wait,
go
no,
ahead
I'm
and go to
sorry.
the next
It's
one.
actually you.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so in this section, just wanted to kind of talk about the environmental document review process. And you don't have to, zoom in and memorize any of this stuff. It's very detailed in there. But at a high level, what you have on the left-hand side going down is the types of classes of action that are developed within Florida. They could be a type 1 categorical exclusion. In Florida, we've got the type 2. It could be an environmental assessment. It could be environmental impact. And then it could be all the various reevaluations. And so that's going down the large boxes. The various rows are basically identifying, okay, if it's this type of class of action, and then the rest of it moving to the right is going to describe what part of the process that you're going to follow. You'll notice at the very high level, when you look in there, you'll see some X's on that first row that are, if we think about what those arrows, large colored arrows are at the top, the first darker blue one is whether or not an OEM, Office of Environmental Management, electronic review and comment is required. We call it ERC in Florida. ERC is a separate application that's not just used by environment, but it's used by design, construction, right-of-way, all the specialties across all the various phases. And it's an internal application that as documents are being drafted, that you can reach out to various experts to review the document and get to their electronic reviews and comments on that. So that first box is whether or not that is required. Do you need to upload stuff and go through that review? The next blue to the right is, do you need to submit an environmental document submittal? Now, what that is our implementation within SWEPT was really looking at, well, how did things get processed manually before? What was the paper process? How did we know all the right people have looked at this before we move forward with this approval? And so we created an electronic routing sheet that has to follow a certain flow depending on the class of action and depending on the nature of the approval. And this electronic routing sheet bounces in sequential order to the various elements in that approval process in order to ensure that when they get to the end, if it's a document that needs to be signed off by the director of the Office of Environmental Management, that all the checks and balances between had to have been completed in order to even show up on his desk. The red box at the top is a district approval required for this particular class of action, this particular approval itself, and then is an OEM, Office of Environmental Management approval required. And the details in there change slightly depending on what the class of action is, or whether it's a reevaluation versus it's the first submission of a type 1 categorical exclusion versus the request for approval piece. And so we do have, within those boxes, there are multi-layers of reviews, and you'll see, if you could click on the type 2 and just show that in the beginning part of the ERC box, there's some work to do, but there isn't for the box right below it. And the difference between the row with the language above is that we consider this to be the initial review. This is the initial drafting. There's not going to be any signatures. It's going to be, is the documentation right? Is it clear? Does it hit all the marks? Is it complete? So as the district works through their local processes and thinks it's ready to go through the approval process, they're going to submit that document into ERC, where our team is going to look at those documents and give them the thumbs up or give them some comments and suggestions to enhance that documentation. In order to go through the routing to be ready for approval, it had to complete this initial review and go through all of those pieces. So that first piece initially is it an ERC? Did all the experts look at it? Did we resolve those issues? Then you go back and you update the documentation. You work with OEM to make sure that the documentation accurately reflects the comments received from us, from the other experts, from legal, from the contamination people, the noise folks, whatever the case may be. And then once the PDC, the Project Development Coordinator, is satisfied that the suggested revisions are reflected in the documentation and supporting documentation, then they give them a thumbs up that this document is ready to begin the approval process. They then load the document and its attachments into the approval process and say it's routing ready for signatures. It's going to go initially to our Project Development Coordinator, who's going to do a thumbs up and verify that everything's right. If something's not, they have the ability to push it back down to the district and say, hey, you missed something, whatever the case may be. Once the Project Development, Project Delivery Coordinator has signed off on it, that it looks right, they then move it up to another layer within the Office of Environmental Management that say, well, actually, I'm sorry. First, before it gets up to Office of Environmental Management, there's actually layers within the district as well. So you've got the document is ready. The project manager verifies that the information's right. It also goes to, there's 2 leaders within each of our districts. There's an environmental manager and there's a project development engineer. Both of those entities are looking at the document from a leadership level. One's looking at the engineering, one's looking at the environmental, and they're verifying that the information is accurate, correct, and up to date, and they're actually providing assurances up to the Office of Environmental Management that has cleared the district review. Once it clears the district review, the project development coordinator, project delivery coordinator reviews everything to make sure that everything coming out of the district is how they would expect it. If it is, they move it on or they push it back, depending on what the nature of their review is and their check. If it's ready to move on, it then goes to a management level review within the Office of Environmental Management. We have an environmental program administrator and an environmental process administrator who both then review the project information details, the supporting the action and all the supporting documentation. If they have any kind of comments, they can push it back down for review. If it successfully passes that review, it then moves on to the director for his review, which he could pass back down if he needs to, or he can sign it. But all along the way, all of those interactions are captured on the electronic routing sheet. And when you actually log on to SWEPT and you go to the bottom of the page, there's an approval history that's captured, and you can see every single step, who had it, when they approved, if they had comments, what the comments are, and you can see it from when it initially started all the way up until final approval on each individual action. I think the next slide is a good visual of sort of the QA steps. If you can move to the next slide for me. Okay, so this is, so a lot of what we do is it can be complicated, and you have to be able to communicate to individuals how you do things so that you can be sure everybody kind of understands the process, where they fit in, where do they fit in the process, what's coming after them, what sort of the expectations are. And Ruth, who's on here, had a fantastic idea of creating a game board. And so this was a game board that we created to kind of walk through our type 2 categorical exclusion process within SWEPT. And so in the middle, we identify all the various players of the game. So you can have folks that are like the project editors. So these are individuals. They could be staff for the department. It could be consultants, but they're given the rights to be able to generate the documentation or upload the analysis, things like that. Then you have folks that are considered the reviewers. They might be technical experts. They're going to provide some QA, QC. They're going to be looking at things. Then in some cases, you may sign a lead reviewer that's going to deal with all the comments and returns back from all the various reviewing elements. Above that, you've got the project manager who's over the project itself and is taking all of the information and consideration from those folks. Then up in the Office of Environmental Management, we've got our project delivery coordinators that are assigned to each DOT district. They're the single point of contact, along with we call them the lead project delivery coordinator, and they also have a lead engineering contact as well. And then we assign a backup PDC, the project delivery coordinator, as well, just to make sure on every FDOT district, we've got a core team that follows every project all the way through from start to finish. We also have those project development managers and district environmental managers. So those are those leaders within the district that in order for a project to be transmitted from the district, it's got to go through their leadership up to the Office of Environmental Management. And so these are the folks that are really the ones that are verifying that the project is complete and that it is a good project and it's ready to go for us. Above our project delivery coordinators, that team that's kind of working with folks, we've got those what we call OEM administrators. Those are environmental program administrator, environmental process administrator, and they're the management level folks within the Office of Environmental Management that are also looking at the documentation for compliance with our manuals, compliance with laws and regulations, are things stated correctly? Is this thing ready to go, or there are things that we may need to enhance to make it a better product? Then we also have the Office of General Counsel, we call it OGC. These are our environmental attorneys that are assigned to our office to help facilitate providing environmental expertise. They also develop administrative records when they need to. They provide legal sufficiency reviews if it's an EIS or if it's a 4F determination, to give those assurances before the director signs off on the action. And then that highest one is the action. So if you go from left to right around the board, you've got, in step one, you've got folks that are beginning to prepare the documentation. They're developing the analysis. They're developing the documents. They're going to work with their district reviewers or their consultant reviewers to review everything and make sure that the documentation's up to spec, that they're using the latest and greatest information, that things are being categorized appropriately, that we're hitting the marks within what's described within the PD&E manual. If they have a lead reviewer, that reviewer is consolidating responses and providing recommendations back to the project manager. The project manager is then acting on those recommendations, either moving forward or not, adjusting the documentation as needed. Once they've got a document that they think is ready to move forward, they're moving it on to their project development manager and environmental manager, saying that it's ready to go. And that whole first block on the left is what we consider to be the district drafting and internal QA QC, when they're just beginning to pull that documentation together. After it leaves the district, the first thing that happens, if this is the first time we're looking at this document, is it's going to be uploaded into ERC, that electronic review and comment system, where it's going to be uploaded in there, and we're going to complete a 30-day review, looking with us and our experts at the documentation to provide the comments back within ERC that are transmitted back to the districts. The districts then have an opportunity to seek some clarification and respond to our comments, and we're going to make the change. Here's why we think we shouldn't make the change. Whatever the case may be, we're going to have that back and forth. And you'll see the last step on there is we're going to work together, and we have a little squiggly plus or minus 30 days to deal with comment resolution, because the reality is it's not moving forward until it's resolved. And so we hope we can do it within that timeline, but we're going to do it however long it's going to take to make sure we're all on the same page on what the expectations are. Once that happens and everybody feels happy and things are resolved, then the document is then identified as being ready to move through the approval process, which is if you jump over the sand, we're in that last set, and it's the approval process that's going from the project manager. They're verifying that, hey, all the updates have been made. They're giving their leadership in the district the heads up. The district leadership is reviewing the materials and providing confirmation that the documentation is ready to enter the approval process. The assigned project delivery coordinator has 14 days, 2 weeks, to go in and verify that the changes have been made and that the document is good to continue on through the approval process. If for some reason it's not and the changes are minor, there's a minor edits process where they have the ability to coordinate with the district and say, hey, you did good on these 9 things. This one thing needs to be changed slightly. I'll give you a couple days to do it. What that does is when we actually have any minor edits that need to happen, we stay within the same approval process, the same number of dates. So if we have 14 days and on day 2, we decide we do have some minor edits and we're going to give them a couple of days, our 14-day clock is still the same. If for some reason it's not a minor edit and it can't be done very quickly, we do have the ability to push that document back down to the district. When you push it back down to the district, that restarts the clock when they resubmit it. But we are, we try to be one DOT, one team. So we try to work together as much as possible and work within the minor edits processes wherever possible. So if the project delivery coordinator feels good that all the documentation is great, they move it up to the environmental program and process administrator, who are looking at it, that managerial review, consistency with the PD&E manual, fresh set of eyes. They haven't been, part of the project throughout the entire review. And if they see something, again, they could potentially work through the minor edits process with the district on the same clock. They have the approval process. Once it leaves the project delivery coordinator, OEM, especially our director, has committed that if it's that ready, that we're going to finish our review and his approval process within 30 days. Out of that 30 days, the first 25 days are given to the approval administrators, the environmental administrator group, and then the director takes the last 5 days of that 30 days to do his review and either approve or, if you needed to, reject if that was a potential outcome. But hopefully with all these multiple layers of coordination all the way throughout, we hope that there's nothing significant at the end that kind of puts us back in the do loop. But you could, but it's highly unlikely. So that's kind of the flow within SWEP. This was a type 2, but it follows the same process, whether it's a higher level document like an environmental assessment, or whether it's an EIS and you're looking at the draft versus the final, and the final that includes the ROD, or the final by itself and the ROD separately. Generally, this is the flow. Some folks draft everything and they internally work within themselves to make sure they've got a document in good shape. They've got a PM that kind of manages that activity. They bring it to their leadership. Their leadership may move forward or may submit back for comments. Once they think at that local level they've got something that is good enough for OEM review, they'll put it in ERC initially. We'll go through the ERC process and comment resolution period until a point where everybody agrees that the comments have been resolved and the document is in good enough shape to go through the approval process. It then goes through the approval process, and right at the tail end before we get to the director, that's where we pull in the environmental program administrators to take a fresh look from the managerial perspective on everything that's been completed at that point, just to make sure that nothing's been missed. Because sometimes, those folks that are in the weeds every single day may not, see the forest through the trees in some instances. Does anybody have any questions on how we go through the review and approval processes? Okay, not hearing anything. I think I just got one more slide. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one for me, Ruth. And that's just to highlight the Office of General Counsel. When they can be part of the review team. Our OGC, our Office of General Counsel, legal attorneys are experts. They can be part of the team developing the documents and providing comments and feedback without having to do a legal sufficiency determination. But there are processes in place and checkoffs within SWEP that if the project is an EIS or includes a one of those larger Section 4F determinations, that a legal sufficiency determination is required. And that same process that I talked about, maybe go back to that chart for me, if you can go back one page. I think it's probably a good visual. Great. So up in the upper right-hand corner, in between where the director is and the environmental program administrators, it also says legal sufficiency, individual Section 4Fs and EISs. And that occurs right in between the environmental program admins. So they've approved it, and normally it would go directly to the director for his approval. But if it is an EIS and it's an individual 4F and these are documents that require legal sufficiency, then instead of being routed directly to the director, they're going to be routed over to our Office of General Counsel, who are going to perform their legal sufficiency review. They'll actually have a form and they'll complete the review within SWEP, and it'll be documented in the approvals below, and it'll show the listing on that routing sheet of who it went through and when it happened. And it can only go to the director after it's completed legal sufficiency and legal sufficiency has been approved. Otherwise, it doesn't move on. So for those classes of action that require that, SWEP's been designed to put in some internal controls to route things in particular ways and ensure that they follow that path in order to make sure we're compliant with our MOU and our requirements in the manuals and things like that. So that next slide just talks about that, what I just actually went through. So if you went through that, so, if a legal sufficiency determination is required, then the process changes a little bit and goes through the administrators before it goes to the director. The last part on there where not necessarily no enhancement or no involvement, is that we can have OGC legal team be part of the review and be part of the coordination and the documentation without requiring a legal sufficiency. In our world, legal review is different than legal sufficiency. I'm sure it is, and everybody else's world as well, and we treat them differently as such. I think you can go to the next slide, and I think that was it for me. Does anybody have any questions relative to any of that before I turn it over to Ruth, and she gets to do the eye candy and kind of show you how SWEP's going to look from y'all's perspective? Okay, not hearing anything, but you know how to reach me. Ruth, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, you should be seeing the demo. No,
yes.
I am now again on our testing server, so don't look at content in terms of projects and stuff because we often play and test things on there, but just the operations of the website itself. You will receive an email when the audit starts with your login information and a link to the site. You just put your username and password in there and click sign in to get started. The first thing you'll see is your project approvals page, which has all the listings of the projects that have been approved during the audit period. Just to give you a little bit of overview of the navigation, at the top bar, that home is actually a breadcrumb. Wherever you are on the site, you can also always back up again. The head there is where you can change your password, and you can update your contact information to include your phone number and address where people can contact you if they're searching for you in SWEP. You can also log out from that page as well, or you just hit the X at the top to log out. Either way. The hamburger menu is that square there. You click it on or off. It gives you more space on the usable part of the page, like so you can see your entire table a little bit more easily without the menu taking up so much room. At the top, you'll notice that on this page, of the three buttons at the top, two of them are activated, the PDF or the Excel, so you can actually download the information from this page if you need to. That might be handy in some cases when you're, especially if you're working from home and stuff, and need that list close by. And like I showed you on the regular page, you can do a search by putting in a keyword or a number or whatever you're searching for. But this page itself actually has a lot of search capabilities. The approvals on the list start out with those within the self-assessment period. And by default, it's showing the first 10 entries, but you can update the page to show more, up to 10 entries if you want to. And then you can also change the visibility of the different columns. Each of those listings there are a column name in the table below, and if you click one, it turns it on or off. You can also export the table to Excel or CVS using those buttons there. And then for each of the columns, there's different ways to sort. Some of them are pull down, some of them are keyword, like here I'm just searching for our District 3 by one of the classes of action. Let's just look at the type 2 CEs there. And the information that's shown here is the FM number, any related FM numbers, whether or not the environmental certification has been completed yet, the project name, the class of action, which I selected on, but also the document type. For example, it might be a type 2 that's a reevaluation. Whether or not there's a section 4F identified. If it's a type 1 CE, it will have the CE number that it qualifies under. If it's linked to our ETDM process, it'll have a link, and it also indicates who approved and what the date was that they approved. Those numbers on the under the FM number, you'll notice that they all have a green link. That green underline means it's a link to the project details page. So I click that link and it will open up the next page, which is where you find out the information about the project. At the top, we also have additional links that will take you to our DOT websites with more financial information or the tip and STIP information. We have the list of project team members with their contacts, the OEM reviewers, and if you need more details to contact them, there's the project contact list, and there's also the green link at the bottom that I'm pointing to right now is the project notifications, and that's the list of any email that SWEPT sent out to somebody about this project as it moved through the review process. On the left here, we just have some basic project information, the county, the district, the project description. Right below that, some work mix information, the class of action. The ETDM numbers has links to information from that process. We have some of our projects are bigger ones, especially have project websites, and we've included the links when those are available. The project schedule data that we're looking at right now shows the different milestones through the environmental process. If it's an A, it means it's actual. In this case, they'll all be actual because these are approvals. But if it's a project that the district was working on, it would, for them, it would show projected dates. And then the next section is the project documents section. The folders are just major categories of information that we have things organized under. You'll notice that in the environmental review process, that's where you'll find the environmental documents itself. And for our type 2 CEs, our type 1 CEs, any of the forms that in the reevals, the supporting documents are listed here as well. They're also found below in all the topic categories, but the link of everything that was actually referenced or attached to the actual document are found under the supporting documents. And that's what this one has, 41 different documents. And you'll notice there's, for every document, there's a publication date, the file size, when it was uploaded. There's also an indicator if it's an attachment or if it's a technical material. And what that means is that if you see this light blue attachment, that means this is a physical attachment to the environmental document that's also uploaded separately in the project file. If you see the purplish technical materials, that means it's referenced in the environmental document. And other things that don't have those links are just backup information, technical materials in the project file that would have supported the project and the determination. We do have a standard naming convention. Starts with the FM number, the class of action, the district, a topical title, and then the date, the publication date. So this internal part, this subject would change depending on the actual file. Another thing I wanted to point out is that sometimes a document supports different resources, like it might be one document that has a lot of different topics in it. And so you'll find a link to the same document in different folders, but we don't duplicate. We're just having links to the same place. When the district uploads a file, they can say which resource it's supporting, and it will be filed under that. So you should be able to find things because we provide it in multiple places, hoping that it's coded correctly so that people can find what they're looking for. And I'm just going to kind of scroll down here a little bit so you can just get a feel for how much of how the files are organized and how many files there are and all the different technical studies that we do to support the decision. By clicking on the green links of the document is how you open it. They're all PDFs, or there might be some Excels or things like that, Microsoft products, but most of them are PDFs, and you can just click on them and it would open it up. Anything that's also coded as a correspondence is also listed at the very bottom of the file as correspondence, so that's easy to find as well. And at the bottom here, you'll see the project approval history that shows basically the history of the project as it went through that process that Pete was talking about earlier, clear through the approval. You can get back to the approvals report by clicking on the menu or by clicking on home. One thing I wanted to note that I just did was click that clear saved search to clear your searches. That's sometimes people like, oh no, where did all the projects go? And realize, oh, I searched for a subset and I just need to clear the search, because it will remember, just in case you want to keep that search and come back to that subset of projects. It will remember that until you tell it not to remember it. So just use the clear save search button right here to clear that. If you need to get in contact with us, our information is right here. We have a help desk. It's it's usually Stephanie. She's very happy to help you. She is really good with this system and knows it backwards and forwards, and she's very friendly, and she would love it if you'd call her or email her to get some help. Pete and I are also on the email, so if you're sending an email to this help contact, we will receive it as well. So we'll all be looking out and making sure that you get taken care of. In addition to the contact list, if you click on the help, you'll first just get a general overview. And this is basically what I just went over. But under the help documents, I wanted to point out that there's links to more detailed training under additional help. There's webinars from previous audit training. There's videos similar to what I just went through, showing SWEPT and showing the audit view page, and more details about that project detail page. There's also some quick guides specifically for you under quick guides. If part of your audit is looking at what our training material is that we provide to other users, this quick guides for other SWEPT roles provides the help, gives you access to that. And the PD&E manual link is here, as well as our contact information for the help desk. So that is the end of the demo. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I think we're good then. Oh, wait, I see some chat.
So
Okay.
all I was going to say was, can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, all I was going to say was we appreciate everybody's time. Ruth, I just wanted to thank you for going through all of that. We do have the recording. It'll probably take about a day. It's got to transfer from one system into another system and change formats and stuff. But we should send out the email either later today or tomorrow with access to it. And you all know how to get a hold of me and Ruth and Stephanie and Joe is a fabulous resource over at Division for you guys as well. And I'm glad you pointed the next slide, which is the videos. All this stuff is out there. Hopefully we've given everybody lots of resources. Hopefully we didn't overload you. There's lots of information out there. Just use the parts that help you do your job the best or understand our processes the best. With that, I guess we're going to sign off. I wish you all the very best. And if you need anything from us, just reach out and we'll be happy to help you in any way we can.
Thank you, Pete, and
Thank you.
it was for the presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome, Marisol.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Bye, everybody. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Hey, Peter.
Yep.
Peter,
Yes, I'm still on.
can we get, can you send like out, okay, can you send us an email with like that graphic, the game board thing
Sure. Yeah,
or
absolutely.
slide or something? Yeah. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I
I'd
think I
like
have
to
it as
have
a
that
PDF.
get a closer look.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries. We'll be
Okay,
happy to.
excellent. Appreciate it.
All
Sounds
right.
good. Thanks for sharing.
Have a
Yep.
Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Ruth, it's Eric. You still there?
Yeah, I am.
I usually jump to get off, but do you need me to stay on until you all click the recording button?
Nope, you're good. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you getting this all set up and all your support.
Oh,
for the
no, no
training.
problem. I mean, you guys did a phenomenal job as usual.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's all right if I leave the go-to
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I want